increasing frequency until it's become almost a daily event, American superfortresses have been taking off from Saipan to attack military targets in Japan. Saipan in the Marianas is only a dot on the map, some 1,500 miles from Tokyo, but after its capture from the Japanese, it was quickly turned into an airbase. And now, once again, the B-29s are on their way with combat cameramen to make a record of this particular attack. That's Tokyo, 20,000 feet below, and the forts cruise over the Japanese capital, making sure of their target, while ack-ack shells burst pretty close. The Nakajima aircraft plant was the chief target, and in spite of clouds, we can see a bit of the plastering it received. Back on Saipan, the Japs have been bombing too, trying to smash the American base and destroy the super forts. Not without some success, as the picture shows. It also shows one of the enemy raiders being shot out of the sky. Above all, it indicates how well the Japs appreciate the menace of super forts, whose attacks, however, they are unable to stop. This is the building in Nuremberg where 20 top Nazis are being tried for many crimes, not the least of which is the breaking of 26 treaties, agreements and assurances. It's 10 o'clock on the first day and everyone in court stands up as the tribunal enters. 4 judges and alternate members, French, American, British and Russian. Lord Justice Lawrence, the President, with Sir Norman Burkitt at his right hand, opens the first trial of its kind that the world has seen.
It only remains for me to direct, in accordance with the provisions of the Charter, that the indictment shall now be read.
Defendants in the dock had had copies of the indictment for over a month, but it must be read.
Of crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, and of a common plan or conspiracy to commit those crimes, all as defined in
the reading of the indictment took all day, but the Nuremberg trial had begun. The second day of the trial was even more dramatic. The first incident was the objection by the defense that they had not had time to study certain documents. This is how Lord Justice Lawrence dealt with that.
The provisions of Article 24 would be followed. But now we will adjourn for 15 minutes in which all of you may consult with your clients.
Okay, recording, that's all for now. We're adjourning for 15 minutes.
A scene of great animation followed, especially among the defendants and their counsel. Goering started writing volumes of notes. Ribbentrop got to work on his counsel. Hess stopped reading his novel and had a good look round. Keitel went into a huddle with Rosenberg. This sort of thing went on all through the 15 minutes, and then the tribunal returned. When all had taken their places, the President called on the defendants to plead.
The defendants to plead guilty or not guilty to the charges against them. Hermann Wilhelm Goering.
As you'll see and hear, Goering's attempt to make a speech was firmly dealt with by Lord Justice Lawrence.
Bevor ich die Frage des Gerichtshofes beantworte, ob ich mich schuldig oder nicht schuldig bekenne,
I informed the court that defendants were not entitled to make a statement. You must plead guilty or not guilty.
Ich bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht schuldig.
Rudolf Hess.
Nein.
That will be entered as a plea of not guilty.
The next defendant called was Ribbentrop.
Ich bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage für nicht schuldig.
Wilhelm Keitel.
Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig.
Next, Rosenberg.
Ich bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht für schuldig.
He was backroom boy number 1 in the Nazi setup.
Julius Streicher.
Nicht schuldig.
It would take too long to show them all, but you probably know Schacht, the Nazis' financial wizard.
Ich bin in keiner Weise schuldig.
And von Papen, ex-chancellor and ex-a lot of things.
Ich bin keinesfalls schuldig.
Arthur Seyss-Inquart.
Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig.
After the pleading, Goering again tried to make a speech. Some people are slow to learn.
You are not entitled to address the tribunal except through your counsel at the present time.
Well, they all pleaded not guilty. And then Mr. Justice Jackson, the chief American prosecutor, began his speech with these striking sentences.
The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored.
But let's pause for a moment to refresh our all-too-short memories of the Nazi plan and the vast misery it produced, the deliberate and ruthless crushing of Poland. The havoc all over the continent with all the attendant cruelties inflicted on millions of innocent people. The crimes committed in the name of Hitler and Nazism at sea. And what Germany called concentration camps. All these horrors we know and should never forget, any more than we forget what they did to Britain when we were alone and weak in arms, though not in spirit. The Nazi leaders who planned and executed aggressive total war against the civilized world can strut and bully and butcher no more. Yet brought to trial at last, they are to receive justice.
That four great nations, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance and voluntarily submit their captive enemies to the judgment of the law is one of the most significant tributes that power has ever paid to reason.
The story of Nazi crimes is a long one. A particular aspect of Nazi organization was explained by Major Coogan, another American prosecutor, who went into details of the origin of the whole conspiracy.
First, a brief reference to the history of the Nazi Party. The court will no doubt recollect that the National Socialist Party had its origin in the German...
And the chart of Nazi organization was displayed in court, a sort of family tree with Hitler at the top. The demeanor of the defendants was interesting. Dönitz and Raeder, Dönitz apparently half asleep. Streicher, the Jew-baiter, he looks furious, but his fury is impotent. As for the rest of them, you can see for yourself.
In all three readings. In the official minutes of this cabinet meeting was the defendant Göring's announcement that he had ordered SA troops on the Polish border to be...
Göring may try to look as if he doesn't care, but the moment he has the chance, he gets very busy on his defense. Well, he needs to, and so do the rest. The trial, certain to be a long one, continues. It was, of course, a very big day in the history of Fulton, Missouri, when President Truman and Winston Churchill paid their visit. About 30,000 people had invaded this small Middle Western town, and if we don't see many of them in the street, it's because they were crowding the campus of Westminster College. But what we might call the collection of another degree wasn't the big event this time. It was Churchill's speech, now awaited by about 3,000 people inside, 30,000 outside, and the rest of the world. It's a pity, but the cameraman's strong lights always worry Mr. Churchill on these occasions. President Truman introduces him.
It's a pleasure to me to introduce Mr. Churchill. He's one of the great men of the age. He's a great Englishman. He's a great Englishman, but he's half American. And it's one of the great privileges of my lifetime to be able to present to you that great world citizen, Winston Churchill.
This is how Churchill began his address in Westminster College, Missouri.
The name Westminster somehow or other seems familiar to me. I feel as if I'd heard of it before. Indeed, now that I come to think of it, it was at Westminster that I received a very large part of my education in politics, dialectics, rhetoric, and one or two other things. The President has told you that it is his wish, as I'm sure it is yours, that I should have full liberty to give my true and faithful counsel in these anxious and baffling times.
The strong lights were making things difficult for him, and at this point it was necessary to dim them, which rather spoils the picture, I'm afraid.
Neither the sure prevention of war nor the continuous rise of world organization will be gained without what I have called the fraternal association of the English-speaking people. This means a special relationship between the British Commonwealth and Empire and the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no time for generalities, and I will venture to be precise. A shadow had fallen upon the scenes so lately lighted by the Allied victory. Nobody knows what Soviet Russia and its Communist International Organization intends to do in the immediate future. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. I do not believe that Soviet Russia desires war. From what I have seen of our Russian friends and allies during the war, I am convinced that there is nothing they admire so much as strength, and there is nothing for which they have less respect than for weakness, especially military weakness. If we adhere faithfully to the Charter of the United Nations and walk forward in sedate and sober strength, seeking no one's land or treasure, seeking to lay no arbitrary control upon the thoughts of men. If all British moral and material forces and convictions are joined with your own in fraternal association, the high roads of the future will be clear, not only for us, but for all, not only for our time, but for a century to come.
Winston Churchill had spoken as a private citizen, but it goes without saying that his words carried the full authority of his unrivaled experience as Britain's great war leader. Let us hope they receive the very serious attention they deserve from all quarters.
No politician is dead until he admits it. Nixon said it, and by golly, Nixon was right. 6 years after defeat for the governorship of California, with his political career apparently in ruins, Richard Milhous Nixon has made a fantastic comeback. Married with 2 daughters, he was born in California. A leading lawyer, the vast income from his practice has helped materially with his presidential campaign. He was 8 years as Eisenhower's vice president and has experience and qualities which could well suit the present climate of dissatisfaction with the Democrats. Castigated by his opponents as Tricky Dick, the last man you'd buy a used car from, he's come up with the best trick in the book.
President of the United States said nothing you young kids would do would have any effect on him. Well, I suggest to the President of the United States, if he wants to know how much effect you youngsters can have on the President, he should make one long-distance phone call to the LBJ Ranch and ask that boy how much effect you can have. Tragically, our nation's leadership, while striving for peace, has adopted a course that makes real peace unlikely. It is a policy that believes we can brutalize the North Vietnamese into making concessions at the negotiating table, that we can convert by words alone a corrupt Saigon government into a government representative and responsive to the needs of its people. Yeah, a dangerous effort is underway in this country to confuse, to divide, to intimidate the American people, including the news commentators of our country. when the great television networks and one of our most distinguished senior statesmen are assaulted by the very highest executives of our government, then it seems to me that no citizen is safe and liberty itself is endangered. That is not the method of this peaceful assembly. It is not the method of America. So I plead again to every citizen, and especially to those in the press and in television on whom all of us depend for our information, do not let them scare you into silence.